Okay, so this lesson, angles of elevation and depression, it's it's still you're still going to be using you're going to be either using trig, meaning your sine, cosine, or tangent, your three trig ratios, or you could be using Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or special right triangles. It's depending on how the information is given. Okay, but it's putting stuff into real life. Okay, and so when we talk about angles of elevation, there can be an angle of elevation, or there can be also an angle of depression. Well, let's think about that. If we say elevation, and I'm going to write for elevation, we're talking about if we are looking up. Elevation is when we are looking up. Like let's say we're on the ground and our angle from the ground to the tip of the mountain, well, that's an angle of elevation. If we're talking about an angle of depression, well, let's say we're standing on top of a building, and here's the building right here, and I'm standing at the very top of the building, and as I look down to a car on the ground, well, this angle that is formed, that is an angle of depression, so it's an angle that is down. So make sure that you understand those are what they mean by angle of elevation or angle of depression. Okay? Well, so here's our first one. Okay? Example 4 says you are measuring the height of a spruce tree. You stand 45 feet from the base. Okay? As you can see, there's the distance from the base of the tree where you are standing, and that distance is 45 feet. You measure an angle of elevation. So from where you're standing, when you look at the top of the tree, this angle here that I'm circling in black, that's the angle of elevation. From where I stand on the ground to the tip of the tree, that angle that is formed is 59 degrees. Well, what they're wanting us to do is they want to know how tall is this tree. Well, if you look at the outline, they've made a right triangle, okay, because the tree is perpendicular to the ground. And so we have a right triangle. So what they're wanting us to find is the height of the tree. Well, since I have a right triangle that's formed by where I stand and the height of the tree and the distance I am from the tree and the angle that is made, I can use my stuff with a right triangle. So all we know is an angle, measure, and a side. Well, we can't use Pythagorean theorem. We don't have a special right triangle, so we're going to have to use trig. Well, let's look at the 45 feet and the height. Okay, well, how do those two things relate to the 59-degree angle? Well, 45 and the height of the tree are the legs. Well, what leg are they to the 59-degree angle? Well, the height of the tree is the opposite leg. That didn't show up very well in blue. It's the opposite leg. Okay, and 45 feet is the adjacent leg. Well, what trig ratio uses opposite and adjacent? Well, tangent does. So it's tangent of a 56-degree angle, and the ratio is the missing opposite leg, which is h, over the adjacent leg, which is 45. Well, the missing part is on top, and so anytime the missing part is on top, we find it by multiplying by that denominator, which is 45. So what we have is 45 tangent 56. And so we'll let our handy dandy calculator do this. As I'm getting my calculator set, you can go ahead and do the same as well. Okay, so I've got 45 tangent 56. Enter. And what I end up with 66.71. Well, that one's not going to round it up, so my final answer is 66.7 degrees. Or it's not degrees, I'm sorry, it's not degrees. The height is 66.7, and since it's in feet, then my answer is 66.7 feet. So let's do another one. Okay. Again, they give us a drawing here. actually, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to try to do number 6 on your own. Notice this is a lot like the tree. Okay, they give you the angle of elevation, which is 70 degrees. They give you the distance that you're standing from the lamp post, and then want you to find the height of the lamp post. And notice over here that this is your right triangle that is formed, so you're going to use the trig ratio to find that missing height. And when you have the answer for this, raise your hand and see if you're right. And if you are stuck, ask a question. Alright, so we've already talked about angle depression, so we don't need to define that again. So we're going to go ahead and go down to example 6. Okay, so in example 6, it says you're skiing on a mountain with an altitude of 1,200 feet. The angle of depression is 21 degrees. Find the distance x you ski down the mountain to the nearest foot. So you can see, I'm going to kind of circle this, or not circle it, but I'm going to outline the triangle or the thing that they're talking about. And what they're wanting you to find is this distance right here of that right triangle. Well, I need to figure out what are these parts of that right triangle that is formed. Well, isn't the x, isn't this part here, isn't that the hypotenuse? So I'm finding the hypotenuse. Well, I need to figure out the other information. Well, here's my angle measure right there. And this 1,200 feet is one of my legs. What leg is it to this angle? Well, isn't that the opposite leg? So what trig ratio uses opposite and hypotenuse? Well, it's some old hippie, right? So it's the sine. So I'm going to go sine of the angle measure equals the opposite leg, which is 1,200, over the hypotenuse, which is our missing part. Well, on this one, look where our missing part is. Our missing part is in the denominator. Well, anytime the missing part is in the denominator, all we do to find the missing part is we take our numerator, which is 1,200, and it's divided by our trig ratio, our trig angle, which is in this case is sine 21. So in your calculator, we're going to go 1,200 divided by sine 21. And what I end up getting is 3,348.51. Well, notice the directions. It doesn't say round to the nearest inch or the nearest tenth. It says round to the nearest foot. So this 8 is the nearest foot. Is that number right here big enough to round it up? Yes, it is. So my real answer is 3,349 feet. So it's going to be that big of a distance or that long of a distance for me to ski down the mountain. Alright, so what I want you to do is I want you to do number 5 on your own. When you think you have an answer, raise your hand and have the sub check. And if you don't, no, don't do number 5, I'm sorry. I want you to do number 27 and number 28 is what I want you to do. Do number 27 and number 28. Once you think you have an answer, raise your hand, have the sub check it. If you're straightened out and good, then you go ahead and begin on the lesson, on the assignment. Also, before the end of the hour, make sure that you hand in the previous lesson, which was the sine, when we did the sine, cosine, and tangent. So that was Wednesday and Thursday's lesson. turn in the notes and turn in the homework, and so that the sub can turn in my box so I can get it, and so that I can grade stuff. And I'll talk to you guys soon.